Bienvenidos, the deep dive. We are diving into a mystery that has captivated generations. El Via Crucis, the Stations of the Cross. To do that, we're going to explore some fascinating narrations in Spanish that you've shared with me all on YouTube.
And what's interesting is how each of these narrations offers a unique lens, a different way of experiencing the events that led to the crucifixion of Jesus.
Exactly, and while they all follow the traditional story, each one gives it a different focus with details that really make you think. Like, for example, one describes the wounds of Jesus in such a vivid way that even Mary almost doesn't recognize him. Can you imagine?
Incredible, right? It's like each narration wants to reveal a small mystery within the greater mystery of the Via Crucis.
Totally, and that's what we're going to explore today. Each station, each detail, each emotion, to better understand the power of this tradition. Ready for the first station?
Of course, let's start with the condemnation of Jesus to death, a crucial moment that sets the tone for the entire Via Crucis.
In one of the narrations, I was struck by the description of Pontius Pilate washing his hands, declaring himself innocent of the blood of Jesus, and the crowd shouting, "Let his blood fall on us and on our children." It's chilling, don't you think?
No doubt that phrase confronts us with collective responsibility, the weight of the crowd's decision, and it makes us wonder, when are we part of a crowd that condemns even indirectly through silence or inaction?
Wow, that's heavy. And from there, we move on to the second station, Jesus carrying the cross. One of the narrations that moved me describes how Jesus accepts this burden with sweetness, meekly, and with a joyful heart. How is it possible to have such strength in the face of suffering?
That image of acceptance in the midst of pain is central to the Via Crucis. It speaks to us about finding meaning even in the most difficult trials, even if we don't fully understand the why.
And some narrations go further, connecting this burden directly with our own sins. It's like Jesus is carrying the weight of our failings.
Yes, it is a recurring theme. It invites us to reflect on the consequences of our actions, how they might contribute to the suffering of others.
Moving on to the third station, Jesus falls for the first time. One of the narrations uses the words of Isaiah, "He was wounded for our transgressions. By his stripes we are healed." It left me thinking about the deeper meaning of that fall.
It's a powerful image, right? It connects the physical suffering of Jesus with our spiritual need for redemption, and it acknowledges that we all stumble, we fail. It's part of the human experience.
And several narrations emphasize the silence of Jesus in this moment. No complaints, no reproaches, just a silent resistance.
That silence is very eloquent. It's a testament to his strength, his determination, and perhaps an invitation for us to find comfort in silent contemplation, especially when we feel overwhelmed by our own struggles.
Profound. Let's continue with the fourth station. Jesus meets his mother Mary. What a heartbreaking moment. One of the narrations describes it as a brief moment of consolation amidst the chaos.
What's striking is how some narrations focus on Mary's strength at that moment. She doesn't try to stop what's happening, but she offers a serene presence, a source of love and support.
And some narrations even mention that Jesus' appearance is so transformed by suffering that Mary barely recognizes him. It's like a foreshadowing of what's to come, don't you think?
That detail adds another layer of pain and mystery. It suggests that even the most intimate relationships are tested by suffering, and that sometimes love requires that we recognize someone even when they're no longer recognizable in their pain.
In the fifth station, Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. This is where the idea of helping to carry each other's burdens comes in right.
Exactly. The station often invites us to reflect on our own willingness to help those who are suffering. Are we like Simon stepping in to offer support, or are we part of the crowd simply watching the suffering unfold?
One of the narrations describes Simon as that man, the favored of God, for his willingness to share this burden. What a powerful description.
It leads us to ask, are we ever chosen to help to alleviate suffering? And if so, do we accept that role, recognizing it as a privilege rather than a burden?
We come to the sixth station. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. This one always moves me. One of the narrations focuses on her courage stepping out of the crowd to offer this simple act of compassion.
What's fascinating here is how Veronica's act is described as a small gesture that expressed all her love for him. It emphasizes that even small acts of kindness can have profound meaning.
And of course, we can't forget the image of Jesus' face imprinted on the cloth. It's like a reminder that even in suffering, there is beauty and power.
That image has resonated throughout history, inspiring countless works of art and devotion. It speaks to the enduring impact of compassion, how it can leave an indelible mark on both the giver and the receiver.
Let's continue with the seventh station. Jesus falls for the second time this fall. Seems almost inevitable, given the weight he's carrying.
What's interesting is how some narrations connect this fall to our own repeated failures. It's that recognition of our human weakness, our tendency to stumble, even when we have the best intentions.
In one of the narrations, the question is posed: when will I learn not to be afraid of looking bad in front of others because of a mistake? It is a reminder that we should not let pride prevent us from seeking help when we need it.
It's a crucial point. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in recognizing our limitations and our need for support.
And we come to the eighth station. Jesus consoles the women of Jerusalem. Here we see his incredible compassion, even in his own agony.
The amazing thing is that Jesus does not focus on his own suffering. He tells the women, "Do not weep for me, but for yourselves and for your children." He's already looking beyond his own pain to the suffering of others.
One of the narrations interprets this as a reminder that true compassion involves recognizing the suffering around us, not just our own.
It's a powerful message, and it challenges us to consider, are we focused on our own pain, or are we aware of the struggles of those around us, willing to offer comfort and support?
We move towards the ninth station. Jesus falls for the third time. This one feels especially heavy, knowing that the crucifixion is approaching.
What's fascinating here is how some narrations link this fall to the idea of spiritual exhaustion. It's not just about physical weakness, but a sense of depletion of having given all you have.
One of the narrations quotes Psalm 37, "Your arrows have pierced me. Your hand has fallen upon me. There is nothing sound in my flesh because of your indignation, no peace in my bones because of my sin."
Those words evoke a deep sense of anguish, both physical and spiritual. They acknowledge that sometimes we reach a point where we feel completely broken, unable to go on.
And yet, even in this state, Jesus continues towards his destiny.
Yeah.
It's a testament to his unwavering commitment, even in the face of unbearable suffering.
It's really a powerful image of perseverance, of finding the strength to continue, even when every fiber of your being wants to give up.
And speaking of strength, we arrive at the 10th station. Jesus is stripped of his garments. One of the narrations describes how the soldiers tear off his clothes, which are stuck to his wounds, causing him even more pain. It's a brutal image.
That detail is particularly striking. It highlights the absolute humiliation and vulnerability of this moment. It's a stark reminder that suffering often leaves us exposed, laying bare our weaknesses and fragilities.
One of the narrations connects this stripping with the idea of letting go of earthly attachments. It's like Jesus is not only being stripped of his clothes, but of everything that ties him to this world.
It's a profound interpretation. It suggests that true surrender involves releasing our grip on material possessions, worldly desires, and even our own sense of self.
We come to the 11th station. Jesus is nailed to the cross. This is where the physical torment reaches its peak. One of the narrations describes the sound of the hammer blows echoing like the beating of Jesus' heart.
That image is so powerful, it creates a visceral sense of the violence and agony of this moment. It also highlights the paradox of the crucifixion, an act of brutal violence that becomes an act of ultimate love and sacrifice.
There's a narration that focuses on the will of Jesus, his surrender to the Father. It's like, even in this moment of extreme suffering, he still chooses love.
That's a crucial point. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, we always have a choice. We can choose to succumb to hate, to despair, or we can choose to embrace love, forgiveness, hope.
And we reach the climactic moment, the 12th station. Jesus dies on the cross, the climax of the Via Crucis, the moment of supreme sacrifice.
What's striking is how some narrations describe a sense of peace that descends after Jesus' death, as if the storm has passed and there's a stillness in the air.
One of them says, "It is finished, he has died to save me, to save us." A simple statement, but so profound.
It encapsulates the essence of the crucifixion, the culmination of a mission, the fulfillment of a promise. It's a moment of deep sorrow and incredible hope at the same time.
In the 13th station, Jesus is taken down from the cross. The focus shifts to Mary, the mother who mourns the loss of her son.
What's fascinating here is the contrast between the brutality of the crucifixion and the tenderness of this moment. It's a reminder that even in the midst of death, love persists.
One of the narrations describes Mary receiving the body of Jesus with tenderness, and she pressed it against her chest, pierced with pain. It's a heartbreaking image, but also beautiful.
It speaks to the enduring power of a mother's love, a love that transcends even death. It also invites us to contemplate our own capacity for compassion and empathy, especially in the face of suffering.
Finally, we arrive at the 14th station. Jesus is laid in the tomb. This is where the Via Crucis ends, but it's also a beginning, right?
Exactly. It's the culmination of one journey and the anticipation of another. the resurrection. It's a reminder that death is not the end, but a transition, a passage into something new.
One of the narrations describes the disciples sealing the tomb and then leaving, but it adds, everything is over, but not after death or resurrection. Teach me to see it as transitory and fleeting in the light of what endures, and may that light illuminate all my actions. Amen.
That's a beautiful sentiment. It invites us to see beyond the immediate, the tangible, and to embrace the hope of something greater, something eternal.
Wow, what an intense journey through the Stations of the Cross. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but it's given me a lot to think about. How about you?
Me too. What I find particularly striking is how these narrations invite us to participate in the story, to connect our own experiences with the events of the Via Crucis.
Yes, they don't just tell us what happened, they ask us, where are you in this story?
It's a powerful invitation to self-reflection, to consider how we might be called to offer compassion, to carry burdens, to find meaning in suffering, and to embrace hope even in the face of death.
And I think that's the key, right? Each station offers us a different point of connection, a lens through which we can look at our own lives.
That's true. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Via Crucis continues to resonate so deeply with people across cultures and centuries. It's not just a story about the past, it's a mirror that reflects our own human experiences.
At the end of this journey through the Stations of the Cross, the question that remains for us is, which figure in the Via Crucis do you identify with most?
That is a very profound question. Are we like Simon offering a helping hand? Like Veronica showing compassion? Or perhaps like one of the women of Jerusalem witnessing suffering?
Perhaps we see ourselves in Pilate, struggling with a difficult decision, or even in the crowd getting swept up in the emotions of the moment.
The wonderful thing about the Via Crucis is that it offers space for all of these perspectives, for all of our complexities and contradictions.
And it reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of redemption, of transformation, of new beginnings.
As we conclude our deep dive into these narrations, I encourage you to continue reflecting on these stories, on their deeper meanings, and on how they might illuminate your own path.
And perhaps we will be inspired to be a little more like Simon, a little more like Veronica, a little more like the compassionate figures who chose love and courage in the face of suffering. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
You know, it's interesting because like when I think about the different figures in the Via Crucis, I find myself drawn to Veronica, you know? Oh yeah, why Veronica?
I don't know. There's something about her courage. You know, like stepping out of the crowd like that to help someone who's clearly suffering.
Yeah, it's a very selfless act, especially considering the circumstances.
Right. And I guess I admire that willingness to show compassion even when it's risky.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of wanting to do something, wanting to help, but maybe feeling hesitant or afraid.
Definitely. And I think that's what makes Veronica so inspiring. You know, she doesn't let fear stop her from acting.
It's a powerful reminder that even small acts of kindness can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. So maybe that's something for us to think about, you know?
Where we can be a little more like Veronica in our own lives.
Exactly. Where can we step out of our comfort zones and show compassion to those who are suffering?
You know, maybe it's a simple act of kindness to a stranger, or maybe it's something more involved like volunteering our time or resources.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think the key is to be present, to be aware of the suffering around us, and to be willing to act.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have the power to impact others.
Well said. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Stations of the Cross.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.